MG Rob back with you, and today we're going to start diving into the TR6. So we got TR6 up on the lift right now, and I've already gone around and sprayed some Please Come Loose juice on some of the bolts and hoses and stuff. So I got some parts here. So along with the exhaust system, we've got a front brake kit. We got a new belt. The tie rod ends, a new boot for the one axle, got clutch master and slave, cylinder, all the brake hoses, clutch hose, the OE green hose kit, and new fuel pump as well. And tomorrow I should be getting the other two exhaust pipes that go in between here and the rear wheel cylinders. So I've been draining the antifreeze and we're about ready to get going on this thing. Now when it comes to servicing the brakes on this, it's very similar to like the MGB, which I've done a video on before. But one of the big differences is the hose here connects to a bracket that's held on the caliper bolts with a short piece of hard line here, whereas on the B the hose goes straight into the caliper. So you need to make sure you can take that loose first, either at this end or here, depending on what you're doing, before you take the caliper off. Alright, so once you get the dust cap off, which can be a little difficult on these because of the shape of them, a little hard to get a hold of. Then you gotta take the cotter pin out, which I already straightened, and then take the nut off, and everything pops right off there. Now these tend to not be nearly as strong as, say, the MGB ones, the spindles. They were known to actually break under racing conditions on basically pretty much all the Triumphs. And they do make uprated versions of these if you're going to be using the car for racing or something. Alright, so just like with the MGB, this hub is separate from the rotor and it's bolted on. But in the case of the B, where there's nuts on the inside here, the hub here is threaded, so these just bolt directly into the hub. So in this case, you can just dugga them out. Once you get all four of them out, we'll take the hub or rotor off the hub. So now this is quite a tight machine fit. So well, I got it off, but it is a pretty tight fit there. So you will have to, beat on it a little bit to get it to come loose, because rust will build up in here a little bit, make it quite tight. Of course, it's better to do it on a regular workbench than on here, but my workbench is too dirty right now to film on. So while we got the rotor off, might as well go ahead and take this opportunity to change the tie rod ends. Of course, I got my handy dandy little tool here. This thing is great to use. Of course, there's no boot there, but you can take these off without destroying the boots with this thing. Just as easy as that with this thing. And then of course what we'll do, I'll mark this and we'll count how many turns it takes to take them off. And when I put the new ones on, we'll put the new ones on exactly the same number of turns before I lock them down, and that should get my alignment really close so that if I have to change it, I'm not going to have to do it very much. Alright, so I counted the number of turns and then put it on the same number of turns back on there and kind of pull this out and get it about the same angle as this. And what I like to do, just give this a little bit of a tap. Kind of set it in that taper a little bit. That'll help hold it while you put the nut on. Now, whereas the original ones were 11/16 to take the nut off, the new ones are 17 millimeter. Very common these days to see new parts like this end up being metric. And that's it. Now we can work on putting the brakes back together. So one thing that's not terribly uncommon is that you get just enough rust in here where all this stuff gets stuck and doesn't want to come apart. Like this here, I had to really work the nut back and forth. If you get that nut broke loose and it still doesn't want to turn, you're probably turning the whole line. So a little bit of heat, it can actually go a long way on this, and then work it back and forth till it comes loose. And then like in this case, now this nut won't come off either. So we just cut the hose off right there, and I'll probably come in here and just bust the nut, or just take a cut-off wheel, something in there, and just cut it off. So since we're not needing to save it, it doesn't matter. Now another way you can sometimes get these off of here without resorting to cutting is once you got that cut off, the hose cut off there, and get a deep socket, like in my case the 9/16 impact socket is deep enough. Put on there and then put a wrench on here, and then sometimes you can get it to come loose. Alright, so in this case it's actually working for me. You gotta make the reason this works is because then you can get a full bite on it with a boxed end wrench, and then it can come loose. Otherwise you'll just strip it out with trying to do open end wrench or just the flare wrench, flare nut wrenches. Now what I like to do when I have everything apart is I like to hit the backing plates with a wire brush and give it a quick coat of paint. I usually use just black engine paint. It dries really quickly. I always take the attitude that the next poor sucker that's got to work on it's probably going to be me, and I want everything to be nice and clean and easy to work on next time. Alright, so we got our new rotors here. I went ahead and did hit this with a wire brush real quick to clean them up. So we're just simple as dropping them on there. They go on a lot easier than they come off. And if you buy the brake kit, like Moss sells, it comes with all new hardware. So we just put new hardware in there. Now, like with all bolts, there is a torque spec to these things, but I'll just be ugga-dugging them back on, because not like this thing doesn't have so much power that's going to be over torquing them. Actually, the power this has is just about right on this. Oops, wrong one. Alright, now I got the right one. Of course, you always want to clean the rotors before you actually put them on the car. The back side I like to clean first because because once you get it on the car with the dust shield in place, it makes it really hard to clean them. And then I clean the front side off once it's on the car. Because rotors are usually shipped with a little bit of light oil on them to keep them from rusting. These aren't, but still good to clean them anyway. So one other way that these differ from the MGB is where the B has all the shim pack in there and the spacer, and you actually torque the nut down, which is actually part of the reason why everything's stronger, because that actually makes the whole spindle stronger. As these are set up just like old American cars. You just turn this until you get it feeling right and back it off to the point where, you know, you got good, it's not too tight, but it isn't sloppy either. It's hard to explain it exactly. And then lock it down, just like the cotter pin keeps that from backing off. One thing I forgot to say was you should always clean and repack the bearings and replace the seals while you're in here. It's a good idea, especially if you have no idea, new car to you, and you have no idea if it's ever been done. In this case, actually the grease looked pretty good in the back bearing, but the front one did need repacked, and I did repack them, so good to go here. All right, now when putting these brake hoses on, just like with the tie rods, these are actually metric. So they take, instead of a 9/16, you're going to use a 15 millimeter on those. Now the nut and the threads are still, of course, correct. And I always keep these little 3/8 jam nuts around so I can put brand new ones on here rather than reusing the old ones. All right, so now I'm putting my calipers back in place here and hooking up the hoses and everything to it. Now, some of you might be questioning why I'm reusing the old calipers. Well, I have actually found out through experience that more often than not, even after they've been sitting for a while, the calipers are just fine and they work with no problems. So I don't automatically default to just putting new calipers on every time, unless that customer just does not feel comfortable with doing it any other way. And in this case, the customer was okay with, finding out for sure. He said there was no problems with them before. As long as they work fine, he's cool with it. So I'll know on the test drive whether they're hanging up or not and need to be replaced. And if we have any problems then we'll go for new calipers. All right, well, that's the front brakes basically taken care of. Now, we still got lots to do on this car, so look for more coming up in the future. This is MG Rob. Later.